What does it mean, the best we've got?
All right, welcome to the New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for tonight, Thursday, November 3rd. Very excited to have Pat Gallagher here tonight. Pat had a myriad of jobs with the Giants, but he's especially going to be talking about his job in marketing with the front office and trying to sell Candlestick Park to the Giant fans. I had sent out a couple of videos for you to watch. And there are two in particular that, Pat, if it's okay, I'm going to show them again today. They're very short, but they definitely hit the point to what Pat accomplished, which was not only were they funny, they were fabulous. So let me just tell you some other things going on. In the last few days, I have added some new guest speakers. The topics up early next year will be Herman Franks. And we have Maury Bouchard here. He's going to be talking about that. I also added Lucky Jack Lorky, book on him. Leo DeRocha, which will be discussed in April. And today I had a wonderful conversation with Will the Thrill Clark. And Will Clark is going to be joining us in early January. So that'll be an incredible thing to see. I see the judge likes that.
Yeah, and I'm not intimidated at all by that lineup.
Next week is the premiere of the Willie Mays documentary, and Thursday we will have the producer and possibly the director to speak about the movie. So your homework is to watch it next week. Starts on Tuesday.
What is that? Tom Hanks' son that did that? Colin Hanks?
No.
Isn't he involved with something though?
Colin Hanks. You might have seen one of the videos about the anti-mascots, about the crazy crowd. He did that.
Oh, okay.
But this is not, the Willie Mays is not with that. So, Pat, do you want me to show these two quick videos first, or do you want to talk first, or what?
Yeah, they're just the short ones. Go ahead.
Yes,
Sure.
So anyway, let's give it up for Pat Gallagher. Pat, so happy to have you here. And I thought these would be really appropriate to share. They're very quick, but they show Pat in his glory and the essence of what he was trying to produce. All right, let's get this. All right, let's move this over. All right, here's one.
Yeah, there's no sound, Gary.
You don't hear it?
No.
I can't hear it. No.
When we ask Giants fans what kind of mascot
Hold on
they
one
like,
second.
63% said
Yeah, that's it.
like mascots, which once again proves that Giants fans are different.
Hey, Frank, need the pinch hitters? I told you, don't you ever touch me again. Hey, get the hawk!
But they love it in Pittsburgh.
I told you, Giants fans are different.
All right, that's one. And let me just show you the other one.
The Giants tried to take advantage of that in their commercial. Eddie, I feel my legs.
Easy, kid, easy. All beer to those valiant few who enjoy the extra inning night game. This year, once again, the Giants present the Quad Candlestick.
But also this year, the Giants have switched to mostly day games and groundskeepers in Hawaiian shirts and new commercials.
This year, Giants fans will experience something new.
The sun.
Sunshine. Yes, it's daytime baseball, 6 days a week. The 1985 Giants. Real class. Sunshine. Baseball.
We're going to give away muscle shirts. We'll give away suntan lotion,
We're gonna dress the ground crew in Hawaiian shirts. It's all part of the theme, but I think the real point is that what we're trying to get across is day baseball is a great way to come spend the day. And Candlestick Park is a real friendly place during the day, unlike it is at night.
You've had cold commercials for night games, hot commercials for day games. What is next?
Well, we promised them every kind of baseball we can think of. One, we promised them winter baseball, and now we promised them summer baseball. And this doesn't work. We had one alternative, and that's the winning baseball, which is pretty radical, but I think it's worth a try.
But day or night at Candlestick, the Giants continue to struggle with the elements.
I've discovered that financially I can do better off playing the day games because I only had to buy one pair of long johns this year and one pair of long wool sleeves. So I found out I could save a lot of money by playing these day games.
I like night games. I don't care how cold it's out here. I like playing under the lights. I think, that's modern baseball. And, I'm a modern baseball player.
But the real issue at Candlestick is not day or night games, but any games at all. Will the Giants move out? There's even talk of doming Candlestick. The running joke in San Francisco is putting a dome on Candlestick is like putting lipstick on a pig. In fact, the Giants dislike the idea of a domed Candlestick so much, they've even made a funny commercial about that.
My guest is Don Doofus of the architectural firm of Doofus and Dorkay.
Mike, as you can see, our firm has developed a boldly innovative approach toward shielding Candlestick Park from the cold night winds here.
Now, the Doofus dome is retractable.
Your arrangement there, Mike.
I see it's a multi-use facility.
Yes, there's a playing field as well as a basketball and the concert hall here. And for the occasional daytime baseball game, the dome is supported in its open position by a massive four-pronged structural member.
Sort of a fork shape.
It is a fork shape, yes.
You want a dome? No, I want 45 to 48,000 seat stadium with good weather, good parking, good access.
So you don't want a dome, you want to stay in the area, and should the A's move to Denver or somewhere else, you wouldn't mind moving into the Oakland Coliseum.
That could be a possibility, but I don't want to hurt the people in San Jose or San Mateo, Redwood City. They have worked hard and we are pursuing our negotiations with them.
So in the meantime, Giants fans continue loyal. They love their Giants and they love Candlestick.
The thing is that we grew up with Candlestick being the way it is, and as somebody said it, maybe a dunk, but it's our dunk, and this is what we're used to for sports.
And so the Giants may still be in last place in the National League West, but they're in first place in their fans' hearts and in their commercials. Glenn Berman at Candlestick.
Ladies and gentlemen, Pat Gallagher. Pat, welcome aboard.
Well, thank you very much. And I gotta say a few words about Gary. He does an incredible job with this program and coming up with new speakers every week and keeping track of it. Not to mention understanding the technology that makes all this stuff work. So Gary, I just got to extend a personal thank you for inviting me and for really helping me along. And I think you should all be grateful for Gary. And let me just start off by saying I got into I was not a baseball guy. I was the marketing guy in the theme park business for SeaWorld and Marine World, two marine parks out here on the West Coast. And right after Bob Lurie bought the Giants in 1976, and he had suffered through those years, a couple of years of attendance of a little more than 500,000, and the team almost moved to Toronto, if you guys remember. And so he stepped in at the last minute. You've heard from him, and he saved the team. So he was looking for a marketing director. Giants had never had one. They had a PR guy, they had a group sales guy. So somebody told me you should apply for this job. And so I did, met with Bob, and after a little while, he offered me the job. So I was 27 years old. I was the marketing director for a theme park, Marine Life Park. And all of a sudden now I'm the marketing director for the San Francisco Giants. And, I probably, if I'd really looked back at it, I figured, hey, this would be a cool thing to do for a couple years. Actually, I wound up staying with the Giants for 32 years. And half of my 16 years was working, I call it the Lurie years. And that's really what I'm going to talk about tonight, the Lurie years. And then the second half of it, I call it the McGowan years, which was after Bob sold the team, after we built the new ballpark, after all that happened. So let me start back. The Giants in 1976, when I joined them, Bob bought the team for $8 million to keep them from going to Toronto. Now, like I say, you could probably get a backup shortstop for that, maybe, but it was just a different era. And so when I came, there were about 20 people in the Giants front office. There's, I think, over 250 now. But it was and so I took the job. I knew how to do events. I knew how to sell, all that stuff. But I have to admit, I was pretty naive to how people felt about Candlestick Park. And so for the first couple of years, I would do, we would do some promotions and I'd do some advertising. And it was more so like, hey, come on out and bring your family, family fun, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But I kept hearing the media talk about what a terrible place it was. I kept hearing, the fans complaining. I kept hearing, and Bob even was talking about maybe there's some sort of an alternative. So I sat there and looked at it and just said, there's got to be a different way. So I hired a couple of advertising guys who came in, and we really did a heart to heart, and we just decided we couldn't do things in a conventional way. So what if we started exaggerating how bad the conditions were at Candlestick, and sort of have a sense of humor about it. So you got to love Bob Lurie. Can you imagine George Steinbrenner, doing this with his marketing guy, where we actually made a presentation and told him that in essence, we wanted to dare people to show up, exaggerate how bad it was. We did commercials that showed like Valley Forge, and we came up with this little button called the Quad of Candlestick, which was a sort of like the Purple Heart of being a Giants fan. It was, you couldn't buy it. You had to earn it for doing what the ultimate act of a Giants fan was, staying until the end of an extra inning night game. So we introduced this in 1983. We did a whole bunch of commercials, and it got some visibility. But that in a lot of markets, this stuff wouldn't work. I mean, I probably would have gotten fired after the first year. But the reaction was, even from the players, was that they sort of, what they really said was, look, it's not that bad. But they appreciated somebody recognizing it. And that was the beginning of a whole shtick of things. The Quad of Candlestick, which you saw, a lot of guys had them on their hats. Like, you still see them out there. Those are the badge of courage. So that was 1983. In 1984, we introduced and I know you've talked about it before, what wasn't intended to be a mascot. It was just a television commercial about a mascot. And you remember during in the early and mid 80s, a lot of teams had these fuzzy mascots. They had the chicken was terrific, I thought, and the Philly Fanatic's still around. But Montreal had one, Cincinnati had one, all these fuzzy mascots. So we wanted to do something else that would show that Giants fans would never put up with something as stupid as a mascot. So we did this phony survey where we asked people, if we had a mascot, would you boo it? And 63% of the people that we surveyed said, yeah, I'd boo it. So we created this mascot called the Crazy Crab. And the commercial that we had, his agent's trying to convince him to go out on the field. He goes on the field, he dances, does the moonwalk, whatever, and the fans boo him off the field. That was, it was meant to show that Giants fans were different. Well, after the reaction to the commercial was so amazing that after a couple of games, we decided to just, what the hell, let's put them out on the field and see what happens. And sure enough, every game, the mascot would go out in the 5th or 6th inning, in between innings, dance to that stupid music through those googly nitwit eyes, and fans would boo him off the field. That was it. That was the whole shtick. It was never meant to be a traditional mascot. It was just a gag. And unfortunately, the 1984 Giants lost 96 games. So in some ways, it was a good thing because the fans sort of focused their anger on the mascot versus the team. And it was by the end of the season, losing 96 games, anything associated with 96 games, gets replaced. So everybody else sort of got fired. I kept my job and and actually convinced. This shows you what an incredible guy Bob Lurie was. Actually convinced him for the 1985 season, because we were trying to, we couldn't make it any warmer out there, but we just want to make people feel better about it. So we decided to play mostly day games. I was on the National League schedule committee at the time, and we only televised 30 games, all road games during those years. So it wasn't an issue about that. So we scheduled 63 day games, and a lot of people were upset about it. Did those commercials to show that during the daytime, it's like Wrigley Field West. It could be a great thing. What I told Jimmy Davenport, who was the manager that year, and Tom Haller was the general manager. Both of them got fired at the end of the year. I said, look, of those 100 losses that we had in 1985, my stupid decision to schedule mostly day games was probably good for at least 10 of them, maybe 6 of them. So anyway, it wound up, and then we wound up getting into, wound up doing things that would create a theme. As we go along here, I'll talk for a while, but I really would rather answer any questions that people have, or maybe get into a talk answering questions about something specific. But when we wound up getting through the 85 season, then something miraculous happens, which happens sometimes, is in 1986, Bob fired himself as the president, made himself chairman, brought Al Rosen in and Roger Craig in, and it was sort of a new era. And Al's philosophy was addition by subtraction. And anybody who complained about the conditions at Candlestick, if you were a player, you were going to be gone. He said, look, we can finish in last place without any of these guys. And in some miracle, in 1986, and I was trying to figure out how to put a label on this thing. What do you say? And I heard Al say, when he started talking about the roster, he was going to bring up this young kid named Will Clark, who was going to be our first baseman. The most surprising one was a little infielder who was in AA named Robbie Thompson that he was going to bring up. And so he was trying to make sense of all this. And he was talking to the media about it, telling them about his roster. And he said something. He said, you gotta like these kids, kind of in a way. And I grabbed that and made that into our theme for 1986. And sure enough, the team actually was pretty good, and we finished. So that set a series of years where we would come up with a theme. Roger Craig kept saying this dumb saying called hum baby. Everything was hum baby this, hum baby that. And so we kind of grabbed that and made it into our theme for 1987. Actually, it's kind of an interesting sidebar. You notice the spelling of hum baby has 2 M's in it. And the reason I did that is I didn't know where this was going, but I wanted to license it and hopefully sell merchandise with the thing name hum baby on it. And in doing that, our lawyer said, well, look, hum baby's too generic. You got to make it a little different. So we just added that extra M. And that gave me the ability after the first year to give Roger Craig a royalty check for about $40,000, which he thanks me for. I talk to him infrequently, but every time I do, he brings it up. So the point, what you get the drift here is that we couldn't make Candlestick any warmer, but we could make it into a friendlier place. And my job, as I've explained before, was I made it simply. My job was supposed to be to get butts in seats any way possible. And So we actually went in from the early 70s, about 500,000 people per year. We also, in 1977, which was my first year, we did all kinds of things. I had the great Wallenda, I mean, remember the patriarch of the Flying Wallenda family? And he had walked across a couple of ballparks before, but I talked to his agent and said, how would you like to walk across the most dangerous ballpark in the world, Candlestick Park, because of the wind and everything? And he said, yes, he did. So, so we strung a wire in between the foul poles, in between games of a Giants-Mets doubleheader in May. In those years, I mean, the only thing worse than one Giants-Mets game was a doubleheader with the Giants and the Mets. So in between games of the doubleheader, I think he was 85 years old at the time. He walked across the wire. We had the ground crew, had the umpires do a ground ruling in case a ball hit the wire. He walked across, he stood on his head in the middle of the wire, threw out the first ball for the second game out of his back pocket, and then finished the thing. It took about 20 minutes. And we had a decent crowd in the ballpark. We made the headlines of every major newspaper in the country. And even I got stuff from around the world. And so I was sort of feeling pretty good about myself. And I walked down the hall to our general manager at the time was Speck Richardson. Some of you guys might remember him. And I went in and I said, well, what do you think? And he screamed at me for about 15 minutes. I was stunned. And the reason he screamed at me was because he said it was too exciting. He said, nobody get out of their seats to go to the concession stand to buy anything. He said, probably cost us 25 grand. So my orders from that point on was for in between games of a doubleheader show, make it interesting, but don't make it so exciting that people would stay in their seats and not go spend money on stuff. So, you kind of learn the hard way, but I wound up staying there for 32 years, and there's a variety of different things along the, but I think what it did in retrospect is it gave Giants fans something to hang their hat on. It gave the media something to write about. It gave our players something to sort of enjoy, and in essence say, they sort of understand what we're going through here. So it was an incredibly great, a great run. And
no, I will in a while. I'm listening to Pat Gallagher.
Well, I'm gonna just stop and see. I know some of you are actually live on the West Coast. We're in San Francisco. For those of you in the New York, this probably makes no sense to you whatsoever. But go ahead. I'll take a question.
Hey, Pat, we have your former boss here, Bob Lurie.
Oh my God, I can't tell any lies about him.
You already have, haven't you?
No. I gave you all the credit. I said, can you imagine George Steinbrenner allowing his marketing director to do some of the things that we did? I don't think so. Go ahead for the question.
Thanks for the comparison.
Hey, Bob, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Well, my pleasure. I'm trying to get the picture going. I can't seem to see your smiling faces.
It's down on the left-hand side. It says video. It's a little button.
I'll find it.
Anyway, go ahead with your question.
Well, first of all, Pat, I had a couple of comments. I thought by showing those two videos, that would be the essence of everything. That's why I let in with that. So I'm sure everybody enjoyed those. I particularly love the McDonald's box with the fork for the retractable dome. Well,
it was so ridiculous, and we sort of made it even more ridiculous by making fun of it. I mean, I look back on it and I go, how the hell did Bob ever allow us to do that? But he did.
And then a couple of other things. As a very young man, teenager, I distinctly remember watching games before you and Bob were involved with the Giants, and they had the AstroTurf, and the games would be at 11 o'clock, Eastern time here. And what struck me always was that the AstroTurf was multicolors. It was it was just dark green, light green, middle. It was just awful. That was one thing. And, you know, as I grew older, staying up, not going to sleep until the games were over, somebody sent me a Croydon candlestick, you know, a friend. And I actually felt that even though I did not live in San Francisco, being an East Coast fan and staying up till all hours, I kind of earned that. So somebody recently sent me a brand new one, and something I treasure.
Wear it proudly.
I will. Norm Coleman, you're up. Norm, unmute.
So I'll try it again.
There you go.
Pat,
Hi, Norm.
Hi, Pat. How are you doing? It's good to see you. All the meetings you've come to, I've just been delighted to see that you're here. I did want to show some visuals to go along with your presentation. For example, you gotta like these kids. And then at the end of the season, you've got to like these old kids too. Hum baby. Hum baby, it's going to be fun. I mean, your era of these slogans are my favorite in Giants history, because it just feels good. Hum baby, let's do it again. And then it feels good. I feel good. 1989. I mean,
wow.
You did a great job with these. And I mean, everyone I know just loved these slogans. As far as the Quad Candlestick, I don't know if you can see that, but you had one in 1984 for the All-Star game.
Yeah, that was, let me tell you a little bit about that. So those of you who remember the legend of Candlestick, relief pitcher Stu Miller he was not blown off the mound. If you talk to some people, it was like he was pinned against the center field fence. That was not the case. He was called for a balk because the wind gust pushed him out of the way. But you know, Stu Miller was a pretty good pitcher. But forever then he was known as the guy who got blown off the mound at Candlestick. It's how it's got its reputation. So we decided to use Stu Miller, and Stu was still around then. For an honorary Quad Candlestick, if you look at the drawing, it's Stu Miller with the wind blowing his hat off. So, you know, I always sort of felt that we were in the fun business. And it's not, a lot of this stuff would not go today. It's pretty corporate today. You know, in terms of the quality of the experience, it's probably a lot better, but we were sort of willing to try anything to try to do something about Candlestick. And I think when we eventually figured out that, you know, when Bob finally said, there's no way, we've tried everything. Maybe it helped us eventually get the impetus together to get a new ballpark built. I don't know, but I know that nobody could ever accuse us of not trying everything.
Well, I think this is the gutsiest one that you did. 1995, on the opening series, you gave out this Quad Candlestick, except for it says non-Vidi, non-Vici, or it says, I did not come, I did not, I did not come, I did not see, but I survived because of the lockout or the work stoppage. And this was,
you know what, and the other thing was tough is that during that, for that year, and also during the years where it was a question about, are the Giants, we're going to be here, we're going to move somewhere, and there were several years. I actually had a button made because it was hard on everybody. It was hard on Bob, probably harder, but you know, all the staff and everybody else trying to figure out, and all the questions. So all the button said was, I don't know. So you could wear it. So if anybody asked you a question about what was going to happen, all you'd have to do is point to that and say, I don't know. So.
Okay, but those actually, so that was my visual, but I have two questions. One quick one, and then one, I don't know how quick it is. Was that Danny DeVito in that video with the crab?
No, it's a guy, it's an actor that we hired to be his agent. No, it's not Danny DeVito, but the guy who was in the crab costume now is performing up in Toronto, I think with Teatro Zinzani. He was a very accomplished mime and a dancer and all that stuff. And, you know, he was looking for extra dough. So we cast him to wear the costume. And then when we decided to put that was just for the TV commercial. When we decided to put it on the field, and I said, we will pay you $75 every game to wear that thing. He jumped at it because, you know, like most actors, you know, it's a long time between gigs. And he came out every day, put that thing on, and he really didn't know anything about baseball. He would just go out and do his thing. And unfortunately, at the end of the season, when everything was terrible, he looked at me and he's putting on his orange, you know, leggings to get ready to go out. And he says, "You don't think anybody out there's got a gun, do you?" And I kind of went, "Oh God, maybe we've taken this thing too far." So the crowd was like a 1 year, you know, like anything during a disappointing season. It's funny that he lasted, you know, for 1 year, 1984, and we're still talking about it how many years later?
So here's my real question now, Pat, and I've wondered about this for years, and that is, who pays for the promotional items like a bobblehead, the trading cards? This is the Giants, the sponsor, a combination, and how do they figure out how many they're giving out?
Well, one of my jobs was to try to find sponsors for all those, because in those days, you know, the Giants were always losing money during those. So one of the things that if you could find a sponsor to help pay for it, you could defray that. So that was one of my jobs. And all these promotional items that you see, you know, some sponsor's name, they're actually paying, you know, for the promotion. That was part of the, you know, part of the deal. And so we would buy those items mostly from, they were most made in Taiwan. Somebody accused me, they told me that my picture was on the wall at a building in Taiwan because I was their best customer. But I don't know if that's true or not. But I will tell you one thing that I learned from that whole piece of it is that how many in the room here, how many of you guys, I know Bob is, how many are left-handed?
I am.
Bob, if he could raise his hand, he'd say left-handed.
Yes, I'm raising it.
He's raising it. One of the things I discovered was, you know, how the percentage of the population that's left-handed, does anybody have an idea what that is?
10%.
It's exactly 7%. And here's 7. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't believe it. And the reason it was important was we used to give away these baseball gloves, you know, to people, and the baseball gloves were, I don't know, made out of plastic, and we bought them from Taiwan or whatever, but people still loved them. And so I had to figure out how many right-handed gloves to get and how many left-handed gloves. And the supplier said, you get 7%, you should be covered. And I didn't believe him. I said, there's no way. So I hedged it, and I ordered, the first year I ordered 15% of the I think 40,000 gloves we gave away. And sure enough, when we gave them away, I had all these left-handed gloves left. And so eventually listened to them, and it's about 7%. So, you know, I don't know, we gave away a bunch of stuff during those years. We actually gave away a beer koozie that we called a beer warmer that you put around your beer. And the whole idea was that it would keep your beer from freezing over, which is totally ridiculous. But, and we not only rented, we had a blanket rental thing. We rented blankets and we sold blankets. And, you know, I mean, God bless people who actually came out and bought tickets to Candlestick Park at night. I mean, Norm, you did, and a lot of the rest of you did too. It was a pretty tough place at night.
Well, thank you very much, Pat. Just one last thing. Did you know that your bobblehead is a collector's item and it's expensive?
I know. And I've got a storage unit with a couple hundred of them. So if anybody's interested, actually, I'll tell you this. If you do give this to, and you're interested, give Gary your address, and I'll send you one. So my bobblehead, when I left the Giants in 2009, the Giants threw a nice party for me, and they gave away, you know, there's a bunch of Pat Gallagher bobbleheads that were at the party. So after the party, there was like, I don't know, 600 people there, something like that. And there was some left over, and they called me and said, do you want these? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll take them. So next morning they delivered a pallet of them to right in front of my garage. And so I didn't know what the hell to do with them. So I stored them. Fast forward a few years later, my son said, hey, Dad, look at this. And so he Googled Pat Gallagher bobblehead. And they were selling them for like $350. My bobblehead is way more valuable than Willie Mace's is, which is ridiculous because there's so few of them. And if you were like a total bobblehead nerd and you had to have every one that was made, mine was one that you had to have. So, you know, it's like the postage stamp with the airplane flying upside down. You know, it was sort of like that. So yeah, Giants bobbleheads, I don't know if anybody's actually paid $350 for them, but it says that the urban myth is that's what they cost.
Thank you, Pat.
Thanks, Tom. Hey, Bob, if you take your cursor, maybe move it around, go to the bottom. There's a video. It says stop video with a red line through it. If you click on it, that's when your picture should show up.
I don't have a red line.
Do you see a little camera on the bottom left?
Bottom left,
Bottom left, it says mute.
Yeah, it should be right
Next to
next
that.
to
Right
it.
next to it.
next to that.
All right, that, it says start video.
That's it.
There it is.
You're in.
Yay.
Now just tilt your head a little and you're all good.
It shows you how mechanical I am.
You did it. We see
Bob
your
is very
glass.
good. The camera's right in the middle of the,
No, he did it. Now he has to
He's
focus.
got to center
that's what I
himself.
mean. Get his face in front of it.
By the way, if some of you do not know, Bob was elected to the Giants Wall of Fame at Oracle Park. Congratulations on that, Bob and Pat. Hopefully one day we'll see something there for you as well.
Good.
Well,
Thanks,
thank you.
Jerry.
Hey, since Bob's on the line, let me embarrass him a little bit. Is that, you know, Bob, the last thing Bob ever wanted to do was sell the Giants, but he went through the years that he went through, aside from just the, you know, the money that was lost, just the amount of abuse all those years. And, you know, finally in 1989, we make it to the World Series. Who's the one team you wouldn't want to play in the World Series is the Oakland A's. And then, you know, a few minutes before we have before the first pitch, you know, we have the earthquake, which lasted 15 seconds. That's a whole other, that's another episode here. But it was, I think, to the Giants' credit, and it took a while. The Giants reached out, and Bob graciously has come back to the new ballpark. It's probably very close to what the new ballpark Bob would have built if he'd been able to keep the Giants in San Francisco. And so this story sort of has a happy ending. You know, the Giants stayed in San Francisco. Bob got honored, as he should have been. And, you know, the Giants stayed. But if anybody in San Francisco 35 years ago or 40 years ago had said the Giants will eventually play in a new ballpark on the waterfront that's privately financed, you know, people would think you'd be crazy.
Yeah.
So anything's possible. Go ahead.
Jim Weber.
Jim Weber.
Pat, you and Mr. Lurie deserve a great vote of confidence for all of the work you did to hold everything together. And in just a moment, in self-defense of Candlestick Park, when I was a kid, I watched the ground get scratched up and they built this thing called Candlestick Park. I watched them build it. I remember so clearly, 75 cents got you into right center field into the bleachers. I went to many games with my mother and father, and we usually went to a night game because my dad worked during the day. One time I had the chance of shaking 2 fingers of Casey Stengel's hand when he was out in right center field. And he and my mother and I talked a little bit. It was great. It was so cold out there. My mother and I would just tough it out all the way. We'd watch the whole game. My dad would go in the car and sit and listen to the game, the rest of it on the radio. So it was just a fabulous place as a kid. I didn't know there was any difference. I thought you're supposed to have fog and wind and rain, and you played baseball in between. So it was you guys did a great job of holding it all together, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. That was the whole thing, you know. And just a note, post note is, you know, Candlestick Park, obviously known for the wind, but it was built close to that hill behind it. And a lot of people said if they built it further out on the landfill, the weather would have been better. And that's probably right. The problem was if they built it out on the landfill instead of on bedrock next to it, the place probably would have collapsed during the 1989 earthquake. So maybe we wound up saving a lot of lives. I don't know.
was a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Mars, you're up.
Well, thanks, Pat, for joining us. Those were fun days. Here's the cap. The reason why the quad, the candlestick is still orange, because it's been in the closet. The ones I would wear sometimes to the game, the sun bleached them out where they would turn yellow. But I had the Stu Miller, I had Goodbye Candlestick. Yeah, I went to all those games. I went to the Businessman Special. That was a 12-game plan. And I sat with seniors from San Mateo County that were all retired. So I was the only one that was still working, but I was on unemployment. So
Hey,
I went to those games, and at night stayed to the extra inning games. My question to you is, why did the fans really hate the Crazy Crab? I thought it was fun.
well, it's because we told them to hate him. You remember the commercial told us, you know, if we told them that they should hate the mascot, that Giants fans were too sophisticated to put up with something as stupid as a mascot. That was the whole premise of the commercial. But after the reaction to it, we just said, well, what the hell? Let's find out. So we put the costume and the guy in it out on the field. And just like we'd actually asked people to do, they booed him off the field. The whole shtick lasted about 35 seconds.
Well, the same fate happened to Rusty. Rusty was booed too.
Well, that's a whole other story. Rusty, and maybe when I talk about, you know, my last 16 years when we actually got the new ballpark built, Rusty was a mechanical man that was on top of the wall out in right field, and Old Navy was our sponsor. They paid us a lot of money to put it there. I think they paid $4 or $5 million to build this mechanical robot. And the mechanical robot was fantastic. It could actually do anything, and it would slide on a rail across the top of the wall. The only thing it couldn't do was get people to like it. As soon as it came out, people started to boo it. And
I remember.
and the people from Old Navy, who were our sponsor, were so freaked out by it that they basically said, "Look, you can keep the money. Just put the robot back in the shed." And we tried a few things. We put the Queen's face on Rusty. We put Mike Kruko's face on Rusty. People still booed it. So we retired Rusty. And then a few years after that, they dismantled it. So there's a junkyard somewhere with parts of Rusty.
I'd love to have it like the Doggy Diner.
I would too. I would too.
Thanks, Pat.
Yeah.
Big Dan Taylor, you're up.
Pat, thanks for all that you and Mr. Lurie have done to foster our love of the Giants and the fun that we've had through the years. I'm curious, everybody I've known in baseball and marketing has always got that one promotion, the one that damaged their blood pressure. And I'm wondering if you've got that story about the one promotion that drove you crazy, either the items barely arrived on time or something along those lines.
Well, and Bob will remember this because he was angry at me after this one, is that, so we do this thing about the quad candlestick. And, you know, normally at most ballparks, when you do a giveaway, you do it at the beginning of the game as people are entering, you know, everybody's orderly going through. But at the end of the game, and as luck would have it, we said the only way we'll give these away at the end of an extra inning night game. So the first extra inning night game was with the Dodgers, and we had a crowd of about 25,000 people. And towards the end of the game, so it was fascinating. We were running all these commercials. The game went into extra innings, and people started cheering. Couldn't figure out why they were cheering. Well, they were cheering because they were going to get this little button. Now, the bad part about it was, and this was I guess this is ultimately my fault, although I guess I could blame some others on it, is that the company that made that, the local Patrick and Company, only shipped us about 6,000 buttons, quad candlesticks. So we distributed them at the gates, and there was almost a riot. Our ballpark operations guy, Don Foreman, they actually picked him up, kind of bent him in half and stuffed him in a trash can. And so nobody was seriously hurt. But after that, Bob called me and just said, you know, he told me, you know, Bob always had a great way of doing it. He first of all had to say something nice, and then he came in with a zinger. And he reamed me for not having enough quad candlesticks. Bob, do you remember that?
I remember the good part, telling you how wonderful you were and how great it was.
This is just this. So that was one where you knew it was going to be a disaster coming, like a tidal wave, and you couldn't really do anything about it. So we figured out a way after that to give them away or in an orderly way, and we had plenty of them. I don't know how many nights over the last from 1983 till the end that we gave them away, but they're definitely
that was a
collector's
great
items.
promotion, really.
It was good.
Thanks for that.
Dennis Snelling, you're up.
Thanks. Really appreciate you taking the time to be here, and both you and Mr. Lurie, and really appreciate Mr. Lurie saving the Giants from going to Toronto. I was a teenager at the time and would really have missed the Giants, and went to a lot of games at Candlestick, a lot of great memories. Pat, I was wondering, were there certain players that you enjoyed working with on promotions, or players that really enjoyed working on the promotions that you remember? And also, maybe you could talk a little bit about, Giants had some great announcers over the years too. You know, Al Michaels and, you know.
I'll do the first part of the question first. And, you know, we had some great players. So the players in 1977 and 78, when I first started, you know, our best pitcher probably was John the Count Montefusco, Ed Halicki, Jim Barr, Bob Nepper. But one of my favorites, because we came back at the same time, it was when Willie McCovey rejoined the Giants in 1977 from the Padres. And, you know, he still had some gas in the tank. And he was a guy who was, you know, when you were with him, he was a very intimidating guy, but it was because he was just very thoughtful, and he spoke softly. Anyway, he and I became great friends, and the Vita Blue also became great friends. In the next year, we traded 7 players for Vita Blue. Montefusco. So these are guys, and we were all about the same age too. I was 27 years old, and 28 years old, and so we sort of became close friends. And I think players sort of got the fact that we were having fun with the ballpark. So for the most part, and particularly led by guys like Mike Krukow and Dwayne Kuiper, who were players then, you know, I think it brought us closer together in a way. I don't know exactly how, but it really did. I think one of the things about, you know, maybe one of the most beloved announcers, Vin Scully, passed away last year. The Giants had a tradition, and I think the announcers and the broadcasters that we had probably had as much to do as anything with people following baseball on the West Coast, at least in Northern California, you know, with Russ Hodges and Lon Simmons. You know, Al Michaels did a couple years with the Giants before he went off to become, you know, famous. And then Hank Greenwald. We had Lindsey Nelson, I think, for 2 years, maybe something like that. And that was a key part, because you could follow the team every day. The announcers are sort of an acquired taste. Not everybody likes everyone, but I think it was a key part of, and we wanted to have, you know, high quality announcers. You know, Mike Krukow and Dwayne Kuiper, who finished their playing careers and came on as announcers. It set a tradition of people who could bring the game to you at home, whether you were at the ball game or you were in your backyard, or whether you were in your car. So, and that's something that I think the Giants are, you know, need to continue. And I know that they know how important it is, but they are, the announcers are people who, you know, the radio is like television, except there's no picture, you know? So anyway.
Thank you, Dennis. Pat, I got a question for you. Len Berman, who did that commercial, was a famous sportscaster here. He mentioned that it was like putting lipstick on a pig, Candlestick Park. What were your reactions? You went along after Bob sold the team, then Peter McGowan bought it. What was your initial reaction when you saw the stadium possibly going from the worst stadium in all of baseball to paradise?
Well, everybody, all the people on the staff, when Bob had sold the team, and it wasn't definite whether the team was going to move to Tampa, St. Petersburg until the National League took a vote, which was in November after the season. And Bob was incredibly understanding and generous with all of us who, sort of didn't know whether we were going to be asked to go or stay or whatever. And we couldn't really talk to anybody until after it was determined. After the whole vote was taken and it was determined that the team was going to wind up staying, Peter McGowan and Larry Baer called me and asked me if I would consider staying. And I had always sort of had one foot out the door. I thought, hey, okay, this 16 years in baseball was great. I'm going to go do something else. So, but it was that's the difficult part of a team moving or a baseball strike, are all the other people that are affected by it. If you work in the ballpark or you work in businesses that are around the ballpark, they're affected by this. And a lot of times those people's lives sort of get lost in the shuffle. But I'm glad that I was asked to stay. I had, an incredible run after that. And, staying someplace 32 years, I figured this would be a fun thing to do for a couple of years. And particularly after some of the things that Bob let us do, I figured I'd get fired every year. I asked him years later, I said, Bob, why didn't you fire me during those years? And Bob's got the great needle. He says, I couldn't fire you. Who else would I get to do that job?
So what was your first reaction when you saw the stadium complete?
Saw the new stadium?
Yes, after seeing what I guess.
Well, you think about this, because I had a hand in helping to design, do some of the elements of the new ballpark, is that when you go from having what's considered the worst ballpark in the big leagues to what some people consider to be, with everything, the best ballpark. I mean, what could be a change? And the greatest thing about it was the effect it had on the fans and the experience of being at the ballpark. We had a chance during the design phase to go, we went to Baltimore, we went to Cleveland, we went to Denver, we went to all the places that had the new ballparks and took the best of the ideas that they had. Maybe in the spring, I'll be happy to come back. We can talk about some of the thought that went into building the new ballpark and designing it, but it couldn't have been more different. And it's something, doing anything in San Francisco is difficult. Building a new ballpark in San Francisco, nobody would have given anybody a chance for that to happen.
Anybody else with any questions for either Pat or Bob?
Gary, if I could real quick.
Dan, absolutely.
Just a quick comment. Pat, while you were talking a few minutes ago, I had a phone call from a great friend of mine that John Van Ornum. And I told him I was on this call and that you and Mr. Lurie were on it. He got all excited and he said, please give them both my best and tell the group that they were the best people I could have ever worked with and that Pat was a genius.
Well, John Van Ornum, his nickname was VO, was one of our coaches for many years, also coached for the Giants for many years in the minor leagues, a high quality guy. I'm glad he's still kicking. And please, I'll just for Bob and me, please tell him that we miss him.
Great, I will. Thanks.
Anybody else with a question or a comment?
Got one more, if I may.
Absolutely, Norm.
Pat, in the 90s, you guys put in those new bleachers and you made sure there was no debris floating around the field. You actually worked real hard to make Candlestick a better place. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, yeah, this was, after it was determined that the team would stay, we had to figure out what to do. And the Chronicle, on a Sunday Chronicle, did something where they did a feature called Fix the Stick. And they asked fans to send them their suggestions. And there was all kinds of crazy ones. But a couple of them we thought were pretty interesting. One of them was, put bleachers in the outfield. One of them was to put a foghorn up for home runs. There were a few other ones. Make the food better. There were a number of different things. So we decided to try to implement that and sort of give the fans credit. And one of the buttons, Norm, I don't know if you had, we had a button for a while that just said, we're listening. And we were listening to what the fans wanted. So we created those bleachers that were out in the sort of the demilitarized zone out there in the outfield at Candlestick. And that was the good part. The bad part, there were two bad parts. One of them was they were made out of metal. And so people right away figured out if you jumped on them and stomped on them, it made a terrible racket. There was nothing we could do about it. The second thing that was bad is that when the 49ers played there, all those things had to be moved out through the center field gate. I mean, it took a lot of time and effort, and it was actually expensive. But one great thing happened is that we didn't have the rights to sell signage in the ballpark. The city gave that to another company. So I don't know if you guys remember, but on the outfield wall at Candlestick, there were two gap signs. There was one in left center and one in right center field, and it just said the gap. And one of our new owners was Don Fisher, who was the founder of the Gap. And I went to him and asked him if, you know, I gave him a one sentence sales pitch. It just said, Bonds rips the ball into the gap in left center field. And he looked at it, and I said, if you could give us $200,000, we'll put two signs up, the only signs on there. And what that did is it defrayed our cost of moving the stands in and out. So, you know, it actually came to something. But you know, the ball dudes, which, you know, rather than having having, you know, young kids, we had senior citizens be ball dudes. And that was a big thing. Maybe the biggest thing was having the first female PA announcer. We had an open tryout and wound up giving the job to Sherry Davis, who has been replaced in the new ballpark by Renelle Moon, and who does a great job. So a couple things sort of happened because of that, and great fun.
Bill, you're up.
Yes, Pat.
Sorry, Norm.
Pat and Mr. Laurie, thank you very much for your presentation. It was really very interesting. I was just wondering if we were interested if we could get your bobblehead that you had mentioned earlier.
I'll tell you what, and I'll make this to Gary because of what you do. If you send your address to Gary,
okay,
he'll send it to me, and I will send you a bobblehead.
Okay, thank you.
I'm trying to get rid of the damn thing.
Norm, do you want to finish? Norm, you want to finish?
Yeah, well, I'll take a bobblehead.
eBay.
No, Pat, I don't have a we're listening button, but I have this. Can you see this? It's a we're listening. You write a letter to you with the examiner, and then you answer the letter. This is your picture right down here on the bottom here.
Oh man, hey Norm, you know too much. You really do. That's amazing. I don't remember that.
Hey Pat, I got one final thing for you and Bob.
Okay.
When they finally tore down the stadium, was there happiness? Was there sadness, resignation to time passing? If both of you could comment, that would be great.
Well, I can tell you this, I was not upset when it was torn down. I mean, it was Pat did an unbelievable job with a horrible problem of trying to sell tickets for that place. And Lefty O'Doul, who was a good friend of mine, said many times, why would they ever build a ballpark there? If they'd ever go there, they'd know how windy and cold it is. So that's a pretty good source because he was out in that area.
My reaction is that when it was all over, first of all, we came up with a theme for the last year. And those of you who remember, Lon Simmons' home run call was "Tell It Goodbye." Well, we basically reappropriated that, and that was our theme for the last year, "Tell It Goodbye." And so we actually got the staff to say, well, we should take some things from Candlestick and bring it to the new ballpark. And as it turned out, we relocated home plate. You know, had a helicopter take it over to the site, but we really couldn't think of anything else. So the only other thing, Candlestick, that foghorn made it out there, and but that's it. That was all. We sort of wanted to turn the page on Candlestick.
So
Thanks,
why
Pat.
would you bring anything else?
Hey, Pat, listen, you made a comment before about coming back and talking about the park. We would love to have you. So why don't we'll talk, and if it'd be so gracious of you, and hopefully Bob can come back as well.
You know what? I'd be delighted to do it, and we can talk more. I'll send a few more. I'll give you some more homework, so then I can mostly answer questions. That seems to be a good way to do it.
This was fabulous. Guys, give it up for Pat Gallagher. Pat, can't thank you and Bob enough. Please don't hesitate to hop on board whenever anybody of interest, in our meetings shows up.
All right, Gary, thank you for having me. I enjoyed it as always.
Gary,
Bob,
thank
thanks
you so much.
Pat, be well. I'll close out the door here, but I'll wait around if anybody wants to chat. Pat,
All
thank
right.
you so much again.
Go Dusty.
Yes.
Yes, go Dusty.
Well,
Dusty Baker, yeah.
let me shut off this thing. Stop recording.